how do I get executive buy-in for my OKRs? Like, I've got a team and I've set some OKRs. When I tell my exec team, my managers, whatever, this is my OKRs, how do I get them to buy into this? How do I get them to support this? This is fundamentally about listening to what your manager is looking for, right? And sometimes it helps to be able to say, if you're unfortunate enough that your manager isn't great at communicating priorities or deciding priorities or being clear about goals, which is really common, surprisingly common. Then sometimes it really helps to be able to just write down, here are the goals that I'm working towards or that my team's working towards. This is the goals that we're trying to do. And now you can have a discussion. Now, what's going to happen here is that if you disagree on something, then if you agree, that's really easy, and you've got your executive buy-in. Where you disagree, it becomes harder. There are two types of disagreement that I want to talk about. One is, I don't think this is the right goal, or this is the right answer, this is the right result. And the second one is, I think we should be doing more. And this more might be a more aggressive target on the same line, or a higher number of different things. Now, in the first case, when you have a disagreement about what to do, which things to be working on, which are the right goals, right? You should have different goals to what you're doing. That's something that I think, realistically, you have a small chance to be able to convince your manager this is the right thing to do and this is why. And usually the why should be related to who the manager's stakeholders are, right? So, and sometimes it's related to the team. Like, sometimes you've got to think of the team is actually their stakeholder, right? They do depend on the team. So they want the team to be happy and want the team to be productive and able to deliver things and solve some of their technical debt, if they have technical debt, things like that. So that is important. But you want to make sure you understand who your manager is trying to keep happy, whether that's customers, partners, downstream partners, upstream partners, their manager, whoever it is. Like, what are they trying to keep happy? What are they trying to achieve? And how does what you're doing help them do that? Because if what you've got in your account doesn't help them do that, it's not going to get their buy-in, and it's not going to get support, and it shouldn't get support, and you should change them. And that's the job, right? And so this is one of the things that I find, I've certainly seen this, particularly from people who've come up as new managers from a technical background, and I did the same thing. I told you earlier, I did the same thing. Going from a technical background into a management role or being a new manager, having an opinion about what to do and then wanting to push that opinion, it's great, but the reason your manager is your manager is because it's their job to make some of these decisions, and they've made different decisions. And so they might be wrong, they might be right, but unfortunately, when you're talking about a company, you're trying to execute a strategy from it's not necessarily just a diktat of the CEO, but somewhere along the line they've decided the strategy, and you have to make decisions. And sometimes those decisions are things you disagree with, but the purpose of a company is to execute those decisions and execute them the best as we can. And if we execute them well and they don't work, then we learn from the decisions, and those managers learn from the decisions, right? That's how they let's change things. If we don't execute them well and they don't work, then those managers think that the problem is the execution, right? And then they've got to change the people executing, or they've got to fix the execution problem. It's a disaster. So always, always, always execute the things that your managers need. Right, that's number one. You can convince them. You can have some input to them. You can change them. You can, especially if you have information about customers and stakeholders and so on, that can change their opinion. But at the end of the day, if they're not happy with it, they don't buy into it, you've got to produce something they buy into. Now, the second kind of problem is the I want you to do more problem. Like you've said, you want to get to 1 second page load time. I think we should get to half a second or 500 milliseconds or whatever it is. We want to be more ambitious. We want to be bolder. Or you've got 3 objectives and 3 key results. I'd like you to have 17 objectives because I want you to do all of these different things. This is a much harder problem, and this is not something that is difficult to solve. The only way to really solve this is to provide information and education about what capacity your team actually has to deliver these things. Sometimes this is about, half a second sounds great. However, the round trip time for the internet ping time is 450 milliseconds. So we can't do this. And the database that we can't change has a 0.3 second response time. We have to make two calls on this database. So we're not going to get to 0.5 seconds or whatever it is, right? Something technical. It might be about, we have this many people on the team and it's going to take us that long, and they're currently working on these things. So we only have about this much effort to put into this. We don't think we can do it. whatever it is. Now, some of this comes down to personal judgment of you as a leader, and your team for that matter. Like, are you actually pushing hard enough? Like, sometimes managers are right to push you harder and go, okay, we can figure out a way of doing this. And I have seen so many situations where a manager said, oh, I think we can do better than this. And the team's gone back to the drawing board and said, oh, we can't possibly do better than that. How do we do better than that? And they've thought about it for half an hour to an hour, 3 hours maybe. They've done some deep dives on some problems, and they found ways of doing this. And I had one situation in particular at Amazon where a team initially said, yes, we can do that. It'll take 3 months to do this thing. And we said, 3 months is not good enough. We need this in less than a month. What else can we do here? And they said, no, we can't do anything. And we escalated. We had, the way it works at Amazon is you get directors involved. So we escalated, and they said, okay, well, we'll pull some extra people on, spend an extra hour or two on this. Yeah, they spent an hour or two, maybe it was 4, on this problem. And they came up with a way of doing it in 1.5 weeks. And then when they executed it, it actually took them less than a week, right? When they actually did it. The only reason they came up with this better solution was because we pushed them hard enough that they actually came up with it. Sometimes pushing helps, and you've got to do the work to make sure that you have really gone through the issues to find out. So that's the kind of thing you can do. You can push and figure out. Sometimes the manager's right. Sometimes their instinct is correct. You can do more, and you can be more ambitious. There's nothing wrong with that. It's part of the job of being a leader. Is pushing the team and trying to find, where is the limit? What can we do? What is ambitious? What's the best that is realistic? Is this really our best work? Is this really the best we can do? That kind of thing. It's sometimes uncomfortable, but that's what you have to do. And the other part is about if you have too many objectives. Now, the too many objectives problem is a challenging problem because most execs, most managers would love to do more things. I've got 10 things on my list. We've got to do all 10 things. The difficulty with this is that frequently enough, you can't do that many things. You just can't focus on so many things. So the way I think you have to deal with this is there's really 2 ways. One is to start out with, well, what's the priority of the things? Let's suppose you can only have one of the things, which is the thing, right? And just force a stack rank. What is the stack rank of this? Which the one? I know they're all essential. I know they're all 100% critical, but what's the most essential, right? And it's a tough question. You got to go through that and provide a ranked list, right? You can then, as you do this, you could provide a list. You can say, this is what I think the list is. This is where I think the list is. And then when you talk to your team, you can draw a line under where you think you'll get to. Like, if we go through this list, we do this. Then the question becomes, should we change anything around here? Number one, is anything in the wrong order? Because if we can do more, we'll probably bring this line down the list, and that becomes that earlier question we had. The other thing you can do in this situation is try to merge some of them into a single statement or a single goal, which is tough because that may mean you have to do more work, and that's not necessarily good. But at least you're focusing the communication. If you try and say we're going to do these 17 things, it confuses people. But if you have 3 things, and they're a bit broader, but you have 3 things, at least it's the kind of things that people can remember and get their teeth into. So that's my tips on how to get executive buy-in for OKRs. So firstly, understand the customer, your managers, stakeholders, and their needs and their problems, and how your OKRs are going to help them solve their problems, and actually really listen to them and what they need, and educate your team on what your manager needs, because you have to line up with what they need. That's the job. Secondly, getting buy-in for OKRs when your managers you propose something and then when your manager wants more, is to do that whole thing about, let's go and dig in and see if we can push for more. Draw a prioritized list and draw a line under where you think you'll get to, and make sure that you've got the list in the right priority, like a right stack ranking order. And merge some things together sometimes with OKRs. It's an interesting question because with tasks, you can't always merge them. It doesn't necessarily help. But with OKRs, you potentially can. And sometimes you can be having a bigger impact without necessarily doing more work, if that makes sense. It's one of those things that tends to happen in teams when you're working together.